be talking about, as Sister Sonia introduced, I'm going to be talking about the gut health and the overall well-being. But before I start the presentation, I just want to quote something that encapsulates what Ellen G. White says about our health. And she says, our physical health is maintained by that which we eat. For that which you put into your body affects all your organs and tissues. A wrong diet or an indulged appetite of a good one greatly hinders mental and physical efficiency. An improper diet not only injures our bodies, but keeps our minds from functioning as well as they should. For example, an intemperate man cannot be a patient man. Again and again, I've shown that God is trying to lead us back step by step to his original design. And this is taken from Counsels on Health, page 450. So this, what she's saying is so true with regards to our gut health. What we eat, you know, there's a popular saying, we are what we eat. What we eat affects our minds, affects our bodies, and it's so important that we take care of our bodies. Our bodies are the temple of God. And we were, you know, as a special price, Christ paid the ultimate price for us. And Christ wants to communicate with us, and he cannot do so if our minds are not clear, they're diseased. So we need to adopt healthy minds. So I think this is just a good introduction, a good way of starting our topic for today. Okay. So what is the gut microbiome? It's a very hot topic right now. It is, for me, it's a very fascinating topic. It's at the center stage of health right now. And for me, because it plays such an integral role in disease processes that that's why it's so important. Once we understand how this gut microbiome works, we can take care of our bodies better. So this gut microbiome, gut meaning the digestive system, and more so the large intestine, the colon, where the microbiome is basically where you have all of these organisms, microorganisms, where you have the bacteria, the yeast, the fungi, the viruses, and they all reside in the colon of your large intestine. And let me give you an example. So if you look at this photo, it is just the gut microbiome is so vast. If you look at this photo, it's like a sea. It is just so, our bodies are composed of trillions of bacteria. In fact, we have more bacteria in our bodies than cells. We have 100 trillion microbes in our bodies. I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of this topic. We have 10 more cells and 150 more types of genetic material in our human bodies than the human cells, yeah? It starts from birth. And the gut microbiome plays an integral role because it aids in digestion, it aids in our immune system, our body immune system, our defense. In fact, 70% of our immune system lies in our gut, and it's a control center for human biology. It is said that the human gut microbiome is like an acquired organ because we develop it over time. Some people call it like, it's like a second brain. Imagine, it's like a second brain because everything is like the central control center for the human biology. Okay. Now, let's look at how does our body develops this gut microbiome? How does it start? Okay, remember I said it's an acquired, it's like an acquired organ. So we start acquiring all of these microorganisms from birth. So during delivery, some people are delivered vaginal delivery or via C-section, and we found that infants that are delivered via vaginal delivery have a more diverse gut microbiome as opposed to somebody that is born via C-section. And then you acquire most of it where your mother's microbiome. And as older, maybe from the age of 3, you start introducing of solid different types of food. It changes over time. And as you progress to adulthood, it changes and it becomes more diverse. And then as we become even older, as we get older, especially people living the gut might, there's less diversity as opposed to middle-aged adulthood. Okay, so in terms of the gut microbiome, we want to have more good bacteria than bad bacteria. Okay, one of the things that is mentioned is that we want to have more bacteroides, which are like things like lactobacillus. These are things that you find in yogurt. And we want these microbes to be resilient, that would help develop our gut wall and that are very metabolically active. Okay. So in terms of how our gut microbiome works, it plays an important role in the processes of digestion. It is super important in the functioning of the immune system, and it produces neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, which contributes to our overall mental health. Listen, the gut microbiome, it communicates with all our organs. Isn't that amazing? It communicates with our brain, our kidneys, our heart. This central organ, which we are acquiring over time, it communicates with all of these organs. Okay, so it's very important that we try to make sure that it gets the best food and our overall health is intact. Okay. Now, if you look at this photo, okay, it's not as complex as it seems. Now, our organism in our gut, they like fiber. And where do we get fiber? Where do we get fiber? Fiber, we're going to be getting fiber from plant-based diet. You're not going to get fiber from animal product. They like fiber. Okay. Now, it's very important that the fiber is not digested, it's fermented by these bacteria. And when it's fermented, it produces what we call these short chain fatty acids. I'm going to try not to get so technical. Short chain fatty acids. It's very important that we remember this, short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids produces metabolites, which we call butyrate, propionate, and acetate. And they have an integral role in terms of the mucus lining. Make sure the mucus line is intact. It provides energy to the microbes. It helps with the digestions of fats in terms of lipid. It helps maintain prevent the imbalance of the gut microbiome, because we want to have a homeostatic environment for our gut. So that is why it's important to have these short chain fatty acids. So with that, once we have that, it helps protect against things like, invading bacteria, things like pathogen. Our gut produces vitamin B12 and vitamin K. Vitamin B12 is very important for this production of red blood cells and for DNA and synthesis and all of these things. Vitamin B12, if you're deficient in that, a lot of people tend to be very tired. They may have weakness in the, nerve problems, pins and needles and things. One of the common symptoms is things like tiredness. It's very important. The gut microbiome is very important for our immune system, both locally and systemically. With COVID, we still have COVID going around. So we need to make sure our immune system is adequate. And one of the ways we can do is making sure our microbes are fed appropriately. It promotes things like intestinal angiography, which basically means forming newer cells, healthier cells. It also gets rid of those cancer cells. Okay, it helps with lipid metabolism and things like people who are diabetic, so improves things like insulin sensitivity and all of these different things. as I said already, it communicates with the brain. So you want to have good neurotransmitters that are populating, that are prevalent, being communicating with the brain as often as possible. Okay. Hope we're everybody's understanding so far. Now, there are other factors that affect the gut microbiome. Things like genetics. Okay. Now, even in, but not so much, but because even in twin studies, when we compare different twins, they also, even though they have the same genetic material, they may have different, their gut microbiome is very different. So genetics does play a role, but not so much. Environmental influences. You find that somebody from Africa or in developing countries, you know, they may have a different gut microbiome to somebody in the UK or the US, okay? Things like your neurotransmitters. Are you happy? Are you stressed out? All of that can affect your microbiome. The overall health of the host. How are we in terms of our immune function? But the most important factor that affects the gut microbiome is our diet. Yeah, our diet is the very most important factor. This is what I think, this is the central contributing factor to our gut health, our diet. So later on, we'll see how our diet affects our gut. But all of these factors in combination, I mean, when it talks about health, health is a holistic thing. So we have to take everything in consideration. But I think diet plays the most important, significant role in our overall gut health, okay? Now, let's look at diet and the impact of dietary protein on the gut. So let's take somebody that has animal, you know, animal protein as compared to plant protein. Okay, so if you look at this diagram, and I hope we are looking at it, we have animal protein. So with the animal proteins, we have all of these bacteria that are being produced that are not so good for us. And as a result of that, there's a substance called TMAO, which is basically trimethyl amino oxide, and this is produced from red meat, and it's a byproduct of all the, not just red meat, but eggs and animal products. You have an increase in that. Just remember, the TMAO is a risk factor. It causes inflammation in the gut, and it's a precursor to developing things like cardiovascular, heart problems, things like stroke, things like cancer, okay? This, just from this metabolite that is produced, TMAO. And then we come across, you have a decrease in short chain fatty acids. We met that short chain fatty acid before, which is so important. That's why we want to have a lot of that short chain fatty acid. If we have a decrease in short chain fatty acids, we are at risk of, you know, a lot of these common ailments like irritable bowel disease, things like obesity, you know, things like diabetes, even things like, you know, a lot of these neurological diseases, things like, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and things like autism. In fact, when it comes to obesity, you know, there's some studies that have been done when they compare an obese rat with, obese mice and a non-obese mice, and they transplanted, because there's a lot of fecal transplant. One of the treatments of dealing with the gut microbiome is fecal transplant. So when they transplanted the microbiome from the obese to the non-obese, there was an increase in their weight, and vice versa. When they transferred the fecal material, the gut microbiome into the obese mice, the non-obese man, there was a decrease in the weight. So it all goes to show that the gut microbiome plays an integral role in all of these modern day diseases that we've seen. So this is what happens when you have animal products, okay? Whereas with the plant products, the plant protein, because we get proteins from plants as well, you have all of those good bacteria being produced. You have things like lactobacillus, which I'm sure that is something that we come across a lot when we buy our yogurt. This is what we want, the bifidobacterium. We have an increase in the short chain fatty acids. This is what we want. This is what we want to use to maintain the integrity of the gut lining. This is what we want to maintain a balance, maintain the right pH. So as if we have a lot of that would decrease the inflammation and increase the gut barrier and all of these things. So this is how basically what we want happening, okay? So this is another diagram again that shows what happened when we use animal protein as compared to the plant-based product. On the left-hand side, if you look at me, look on the left, you have your pH becomes imbalanced, but this is when you're taking animal products. Things like if you use a lot of sugar, we know sugar, especially fructose, if you're going to be using a lot of saturated fatty acids and all of that, that can cause imbalance to your gut microbiome. As a result, you have a decrease in your short chain fatty acid. You have an increase of that molecule that we mentioned before, TMAO. You have an increase of lipopolysaccharide production. And all of this, basically what this is like the enterotoxin that causes destruction to your gut lining. We have things like increase in cardiovascular risk, cause increase in gut inflammation. This is where we see a lot of these digestive diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's and all of these different things. You have also increased cognitive decline. There's a cognitive decline, and there is things like insulin problems with your metabolism, diabetes, and all of these different things that you can have occurring. However, on the other side, on the flip side, if your diet is of a plant-based type, more, as I said, you only get fiber from plants. And you're gonna be feeding your gut microbiome with probiotics. You have an increase in this short chain fatty acid that I mentioned earlier. You have increase in antioxidant, decrease in kidney toxins. You have an improved lipid metabolism, and you have low gut inflammation. Your insulin sensitivity is increased, and your risk of infection is reduced. So this for me represents a good dynamic as what happened with our diet when we eat a plant-based diet as opposed to a diet that is full of saturated fatty acids and you know there are other factors not just diet, but I mean diet is the most important factor that affects our gut microbiome. Okay, one of the common things that we use, what do we see here? Sweeteners. And even though they're approved by the FDA as a replacement for sugar, a lot of the times they're even more sweeter than the table sugar that we use. And they as well, they can definitely cause an imbalance to your gut microbiome. And we don't want that. We want to have healthy bugs. We want our bugs to be getting healthy things. So sweeteners, we have to be very cautious of them, okay? And as I said, sometimes they are even sweeter than the table sugar as well. They promote them and say that they're less calories and all of that, but they are detrimental to our bodies, okay? And what about food additives and emulsifiers? Food additives are known to enhance the flavor of food. They're good preservatives. They help stabilize the product, the consistency and stuff of the product. But these are some of the things that if we checked our ingredients, the MSG, and I'm sure you've heard this. It makes the food taste really, really tasty, but it's not good for our gut microbiome. Things like canned foods that has a lot of preservatives. Look at this one, salad dressing. You know, you think that salad dressing is always better. If you can make your own salad dressing, that would be even better. But they have a lot of preservatives in them. All of these artificial coloring, the emulsifiers that they put in ice cream, potato chips. These are things that we love, we enjoy. Things like carbonated soda, yogurt, chewing gum. All of these affect our gut microbiome. And things like high fructose corn syrup, we have to be mindful, be careful with these as well. All of these things can affect our gut microbiome, causes an imbalance. So we have to be very, very cautious with these products. Now, there's other drugs that can also affect our microbiome. I don't know if you've heard of proton pump inhibitors. Some of us who have, things like indigestion and gastritis and all of these things, your doctor may put you on something called omeprazole, which is a proton pump inhibitor, or something called lansoprazole. Now, in the short run, we try to, it may be effective, especially if you suffer from acid reflux, but try, if you're on this medication, try your best to come off of it. If you don't need to, try to reduce the amount of time that you're taking this medication. It not just affects your gut, but it causes electrolyte imbalance. It causes, it's things like weakens your bones and stuff like that. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is antibiotics. I don't know how you guys are, but I have a lot of patients. If you just get a chest infection, or you have a bit of a sore throat, a lot of people like to go on antibiotics. Okay, it is very notorious for affecting our gut. Be aware that, and also be aware that even livestock, they're given low doses of antibiotics to increase growth and weight. So be mindful of them as well. Things like laxative as well. Also be aware, things like bowel collapse and osmolax can also affect our gut health. So be mindful of those. Things like sleeping tablets. Sleeping tablets, a lot of us have problems sleeping, and we sometimes resort to sleeping tablets, but they can affect our overall health, our gut as well. So just be mindful. So in addition to our diet, things like our drugs and all of these different things that we use can affect our gut health. Okay. And then the other thing is the special diets that we go on. So I don't know if anybody has ever been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. One of the first diet that we put patients on is called low Fodmap diet, which is basically, certain fruits and they take out. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols, and is used to treat irritable bowel syndrome. This is one of the special diet that if you're going to be on it, you should be on it for just a short period, just a few months. It can affect your gut as microbiome as well. Things like gluten-free diets. No, there's some people who have who are generally intolerant to gluten. Some people that have conditions that we call celiac disease and gluten intolerance, and they have to be on gluten-free diets. However, I've noted that this gluten-free I think it's become a bit of a trend right now in terms of how we eat. But basically what we're doing is that we're restricting our diets from, or restricting certain things, because you need carbs, and that's where you have a lot of the fiber. So we just be mindful that if you're going to go on these diets, you need to go on them for a short period and maybe try reintroducing some of these foods back into your diet. It could be that things like quinoa you might be able to take, but just try and see what you can introduce, because you might be missing out on providing your body with the fiber that it needs. So these are special. The other thing is keto diet. Keto is another popular diet that has been on the rise now. It's an excellent way to lose weight, and you will lose the weight. But I find my experience is that a lot of people they regain the weight or even more weight. But overall, it can affect your gut health. So if you're going to go on any of these diets, if you're going to go on any of these diets, make sure it is for a short period and not for any extended amount of time. Okay. Now, one of the things that I said early on is that our environment affects our gut microbiome. And there was this doctor in Canada called Dr. Dennis Burnett. And he published a paper when he looked at the contrast between people living in developing countries as opposed to Western, opposed to the West. And what he published, this was back in 1972, and it still happens now, whereby a lot of these diseases which we have now in the West, such as diverticular disease, appendicitis, bowel cancer. Bowel cancer is the third leading cancer in the world. Ulcerative colitis, edematous polyps, they're not present in the developing countries. And it all boils down to what we eat. A lot of our food does not contain much fiber. So from since then, this article was published in 1972. We're still, I think we're even worse now, where we see there's a great contrast in terms of the food that we eat and the diseases that those countries have, the developing countries, and what we have in the West. Okay, and the common factor is the lack of fiber. Okay. So, as I said, colorectal cancer is on the rise. And in this country, we don't start screening until you're 60 and over, but we're seeing a lot of it being present now in even younger people, younger than 60. We saw it with this famous actor Chadwick Boseman, where he had he had colorectal cancer when I think he was in his early 40s. Now, these are some of the reasons why meat causes colorectal cancer. There is the heme iron that is being produced, and it produces heterocyclic amides, which causes polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, nitrates, and nitrites, which causes inflammation and damage, DNA damage, and precancerous changes. So just bear that in mind when you have meat, especially red meat. Okay. So all is not lost. We can manipulate the gut microbiome through our diets. And this has been shown many times, whereby they can just in a matter of days, we can change our gut microbiome, as opposed to human DNA. In a matter of days and weeks, we can just change how our gut microbiome looks. So a study was conducted in Philadelphia, and they compared the diets of two places in rural Africa and America, whereby we found that those people who were living in America, they had 9 out of 20, or 45% of the population had adenomas or colorectal cancer. They had lesser, remember we came across that word short chain fatty acids, they were lower, and they had a higher risk, basically they had a higher risk of colorectal cancer. Whereas those living in, this is in South Africa, they had a much lower colorectal cancer risk because of they had more short chain fatty acid, less secondary bile acids. So this was the general when they looked at the stats with these two countries, these two populations. So what they did was that they looked at the diet. So in the Americans, they had things like sausages and pancake for breakfast. And then for lunch, they may have had things like spaghetti and meatballs and hot dogs and beans. And for dinner, they had things like roast beef and mash. Whereas in rural Africa, this is South Africa, they had things like spinach, red peppers, onions, corn fritters. For lunch, they had things like mango slices, kale and salad, and African potato salad. This is in rural Africa. Now, what they did was they did a food swap. So for 2 weeks, they did a food swap. So the Americans had the diet of the rural Africans. And within 2 weeks, imagine that, 2 weeks, they had more short chain fatty acids, which we mentioned early on. They had high amount of fecal butyrate. They had lower secondary bile acids, which is also, and then the overall colorectal cancer risk was lower. And when those people from the rural had the American diet, you see the opposite happening. They say, you know, so their risk was even higher as well. So what does this experiment shows? We have shown in individuals from high risk and from low risk cancer population that changes in the food content of fiber and fat had remarkable effects on their colonic microbiota and metabolomes within 2 weeks. And critically, these changes were associated with significant changes in mucosal inflammation and proliferation. So that's just good news for us, that we, just in a matter of days, we can change our gut microbiome just by what we eat, okay? So I'm sure you've come across of probiotic and prebiotics and things like these are things that we can use along with our diet to feed our bacteria. So probiotics, which are things that contain live bacteria and yeast, when administered in variable form and in adequate amounts, are beneficial to human health. Well, prebiotic is used to describe non-digestible food ingredients that are fermented in the colon by the gut bacteria. And then you would have a combination where we have symbiotics, which is a mixture of probiotic and prebiotics. A lot of the times, a lot of my patients who you take antibiotics, we'd encourage them to take some probiotics as well as with the diet as well too. That would help flourish your gut flora. So what foods are found that has prebiotics? Things like breast milk. I know a lot of us pass that stage. You know, things like antichoke, leeks, onions, garlic. These are all prebiotics. Asparagus. These are things that we should eat. Things like whole grains, beans, green bananas, oats, soya beans. These are things that are good for our microbes in our gut. And the probiotics, which would be things like sauerkraut, kimchi, tempeh, miso, things like that are probiotic, and these are plant-based, okay? Now, part of the I don't know if anybody is familiar. I don't know if anybody have ever heard of the baobab. This is a tree that is endemic to places like Australia, India, Madagascar. I don't know if anybody ever saw this tree. One of the things that Sister Jacqueline mentioned is that we do medical missionary work, and one of our trips that we're going to be doing this year is we're going to Tanzania. And the Tanzanian, they have this fruit. If you see the fruit, the pulp of the fruit that they use, a lot of the local people use this, and it's rich in vitamins and minerals. But more so, the Italians have studied this fruit and they say that they think it's an excellent probiotic that can be used. So, you know, be on the watch out for this plant, because it's something that they're gonna try using in the near future as a probiotic. So this is Baobab. I don't know if anybody in the audience ever heard of it. Okay. And finally, I want to, you know, the plant-based pyramid. I'm sure some of us have seen how we should be eating more vegetables, abundant, as much vegetables as possible. Grains, vegetables and grains, leafy veggies, and less fats and oils. This is how our diet should look on a daily basis. In fact, we should be aiming for at least 30 different types of plant-based food a week, 30 different types. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just vegetable. It could be things like turmeric, things like ginger, things like nuts. This is what we should be aiming for on a daily basis. If we can try and get 30 different types in that, it will be excellent for our gut microbiome. Okay. So I'm coming to the end. So advice for a healthy microbiome. And to conclude, we need to have a high fiber diet, plant-based mostly plant, aiming for 30 different types of plant-based foods per week, avoiding processed food, avoiding ultra-processed food, using things like spices, green juices, unpasteurized fermented products. And our lifestyle, that is very important. Our gut is affected by how we live. So, you know, are we stressed out? Because stress plays can affect our gut. So they don't like to be stressed out. So, you know, doing things like socializing. I think having this forum where women can meet and discuss important issues, this is a very good thing that we can do for our gut health. Getting exposure to the sun, making sure you have adequate sunlight, all of this affect our gut microbiome. Things like exercise. Are we exercising at least 30 minutes every day, 5 days a week? All of that is can affect our gut. And most importantly, meditating on the word of God. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. What a wonderful, inspiring presentation you've shared with us today. So much information. And I'm sure the ladies were blessed. You know, the area of the gut, wow, gut microbiome is huge. And as you quite rightly says, you know, in time, they're actually saying now it's an additional organ in the body. Because you're right, we only just scratched the surface in terms of what we know about the gut microbiome. Now I've got lots of questions for you. We'll just proceed with the first one. So I have IBS and of course high blood pressure, heart atrial fibrillation, and type 2 diabetes. Can you tell me what gut microbiome I need to increase in my gut? Now, as a practitioner myself, I know there's quite a few different microbes that we need to increase. And years gone by, you know, or people talk about the ancestors or people of before our time, they had loads more microbes than what we have today, especially when we call ourselves Westerners. So there are particular ones that we need to nurture and feed. And when you talk about the fiber, it's huge. And I don't think we all have enough fiber in our diet every day. So the question is, can you tell me how to increase that microbe that's relating to my IBS, my high blood pressure? What do I do as a person who's suffering with all these ailments, for these health conditions?
Yeah, so you mentioned an important thing, fiber. I think in terms of the UK population, we are supposed to be taking 30 grams of fiber a day, and they say only about 10%, just about 10% of the population in UK adults are meeting that requirement. As I said in the presentation, fiber, we get fiber from our plant-based products. Fiber is, you're not going to get any fiber from animals at all. So if you can, if you can adopt a diet that is plant-based, that is going to help with your diabetes. As I don't know, any type of diabetes, whether or not it's type 1 or type 2, is going to help with you lose weight. If you have blood pressure, it's going to help bring down the blood pressure as well. In terms of bacteria, some of the good, but there are quite a few of them. One of the most common ones is like the bacterial thyroid, the bacterial thyroid that you can use. Those are some of the common good ones. In terms of diet, in specific diets, things like okra is a very, very good source of fiber. Things like cauliflower, things like asparagus. These are things that you can, they're plentiful and they're excellent source of things to use to help reduce your blood pressure and to get those fiber in. Okra, cauliflower, we call these cruciferous plants, these things that you can use. But IBS, the thing about IBS, I tell patients, IBS is, there's nothing wrong with the way how it works. There's nothing wrong with your organs structurally, it's the way how it functions. So it's basically an imbalance, a dysregulation between your gut and your brain. That's what IBS is. Things like stress and all of that can exacerbate IBS. So if you can try working on the stress factor, like doing things like deep breathe exercises and all of these different things, this can help with your gut microbiome. And of course, the other things that I mentioned, like no processed food, things like sugar, cutting out things like sugar as well out of your diet. That's very, very important as well. Okay.
Thank you. So we also have linked question. We're on the topic of fiber. And one of the questions is saying, I am experiencing a lot of flatulence and have lost the ability to completely empty my bowels every time I use a toilet. I am personally pescatarian, so they do eat fish. I have increased my fiber and water. Please advise.
So how much water do they use? How much water do they use?
Right. Haven't specifically said how much water or how much fiber.
Okay.
So, because I know sometimes when you don't eat a lot of fiber and you've now been advised to eat fiber, we pile the plate up and we quite rightly so, fruits and vegetables. But then if you haven't got the good microbes to start breaking that down, you'll have the bloating. So I'm not quite sure if that's what this person is experiencing, but what could you advise?
Okay, so the thing about flatulence, again, it all boils down to what we're eating. So if that person is using a lot of, the person said they use a lot of plant-based, they've increased their fiber intake. But if they're also using a lot of meats as well, red meat especially.
The pescatarian, so they eat fish, or the pescatarian.
They only eat fish.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing I'll also like to know is about their stress level. Are they, because all of that can contribute to your if you're stressed and you're tense and anxious and all of that, that can cause a lot of flatulence. And so even certain food, the way how you prepare the food as well. Sometimes there's certain like beans and stuff. Do you soak it overnight? Do you get rid of all that nitrogen and all of these things? These are things to consider in terms of, and that can cause a lot of flatulence as well. So I would say it's good that the person is drinking a lot of water. Water is very important. At least 2 liters of water a day. try to avoid things like tin beans. Try to use a lot of things like doing when you're eating as well. Do you chew your food? So if are you chewing, it's at least 30 times, you understand, making sure you're chewing properly as well, all of that, and the way how you're preparing your food. Sorry,
go ahead. I think there's some interference.
So drinking a lot of water, a lot of fiber, the way how you're preparing your food, okay, things like that can cause a lot of flatulence, and making sure that you are relaxed as well. You're not stressed out, which can cause a lot of tense and abdominal bloating and flatulence. These are things that you need to take in consideration as well. Yeah.
Yes, great point there. Because also when you're stressed out and eating your food when you're feeling stressed is not a very good thing to do. Yeah, because stress will just stop the foods from being digested properly.
And things like one last thing, things like tin beans and all of these things which are pasteurized and sterilized, all of that can get rid of the bacteria and stuff like that. So trying to avoid these kind of foods. Okay.
Great, thank you. Next question on B12. So if you're plant-based, how are you getting your B12? Vitamin B12, because that's really important for the body.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. So B12 is the microorganism. You get B12 from the soil, the microorganism in the soil. And and a lot, you see the animals get their, we tell our patients, oh, you got to eat meat and stuff like that to get your B12, but the animals getting it from the soil, from the grass and all of these different things. Unfortunately, vitamin B12 is something that I would encourage a supplement. If you're vegan, especially if you're vegan, you would definitely have to use a supplement, or using things like yeast flakes and extracts and stuff like that. That's how you're going to get your B12. Okay.
All right. All right. And the next question, please advise which is the best yogurt to buy.
That one is a bit.
Good question. Good question. Yeah.
One is a bit technical. Listen, I prefer to go the natural way. I mean, a lot of these products are full of sugar and if you can go, you can do your own. You can have your own. You can make your own fermented food from things like kimchi and sauerkraut, cabbages, and all of these different things. A lot of these places, these supermarkets, these businesses, it's a money-making thing. Yogurts and stuff like that. They're in one sense they're good because they have the light bacteria like the lactobacillus and all of these different things. But you can find alternative, I would say. So, if you can get into the habit of using your prebiotics and your probiotics that we mentioned, things like that, I think that is of a better option. A lot of these yogurts, although they may have some of these things that we mentioned, but they're also full of sugar and that kind of thing. So, yeah. So I'm not an expert on yogurt, but I would say try and use the natural stuff that I mentioned. So sauerkraut and kimchi and all of these different things, try and use those instead. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Yeah, because you're quite right. A lot of the yogurts in the shops, in the supermarket especially, are filled with sugars and preservatives. So yeah, there are some other ones out there, particular brand names, but yeah, I will contact the person with that. The next question is, what is the remedy for pins and needles? Remember you mentioned that in the presentation. What would you say the remedies are for pins and needles? Now that's going to be a big one because, what's driving by it. But in relation to the gut microbiome, what would you suggest is happening there with that person?
Yeah, it's a big one. So as we mentioned, the gut produces helps with the production of vitamin B12. You can also get B12 from supplements. That's one thing. You can get I mean, I have a lot of patients that are B12 deficient, and depending on what level they are, we would either give them the injection, so we'll give them intramuscular injection. That's one option. Or we give them supplements. Now, pins and needles, one of the symptoms of pins and needles, yes, is a deficiency of vitamin B12. So we give them supplements, injection, diet as well. So things like your dark leaf greeny vegetables, that's very good for vitamin B12 deficiency. But it all depends on the cause, because you have to look. I mean, I know he's talking about gut microbiome, but then there are many causes of pins and needles. Is it the case of things like diabetes? Is it a case of some sort of autoimmune problem, something like multiple sclerosis? So there are many causes. So it all depends on what the cause is. But if it's related to the gut, yeah, I would say you can use some supplements, as well as you can use your diets as well. So dark leaf greeny vegetables and things like that can help.
Great, thank you. So what would you suggest to replace the medication omeprazole with, and also lansoprazole? So both of them, what would you suggest? What are the alternatives to using those medications?
So so we call them proton pump inhibitors. Yeah. So if you can try to, there are things that we prescribe, that your GP may prescribe, something like ranitidine. I know it's another medication, things like ranitidine, and it all depends on the cause of the reason why you're on the proton pump inhibitor. If you're somebody that suffers from gastritis or acid reflux or whatever the case, it may be a case of just changing your lifestyle. So are you using a lot of spicy foods? Are you getting enough rest? Do you have bad habits, alcohol, smoking? So it all depends on the cause of the reason why you're using a proton pump inhibitor. But there are other alternative things like ranitidine. I don't know if anybody ever heard of it. That's one of the other options that we give our patients if they're suffering from acid reflux or one of those things. So that's something that can be used along the way. But it all depends on the cause. There's some people who has to be on it, like if they have a hiatus hernia or things like that, they would have to be on that for some time. But I try to tell patients, if you can reduce it, use it maybe on alternate days, or maybe reduce to maybe half the amount that you're taking. So if you're taking maybe 20 milligrams a day, maybe go down to maybe half a tablet, maybe 10 milligrams a day, and gradually just try and getting your body accustomed to not using it. These are things that you can do.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. There's a question on IBS. What's the treatment? Now, again, it's very broad, but so I'm not quite sure if this person has, is it diarrhea, is it constipation, is it acid reflux, is it bloating? But what would you say the general advice would be around treating IBS?
Yeah, irritable bowel syndrome is a very common one. I find, your GP may put you on this thing called a low Fodmap diet, but that's what they will do initially. These are things that they would do. They'll probably put you on a tablet called mebeverine that would help with the abdominal spasm and the pain. They may also they'll give you sometimes people that have IBS, they suffer from constipation. So they'll probably give you things to help with the constipation, like some sort of laxative. But ultimately, I think if we adopt a plant-based diet, all of these symptoms that we are having, we wouldn't have the need to all of these different diets that we wouldn't have all of these symptoms related to IBS. So a plant-based diet, that's one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation, plant-based diet. Stress, doing things to release stress. So things like anxiety and all of this, because it's a matter of IBS is an imbalance between the brain and the gut. Stress and anxiety can alter your gut microbiome. So doing things like relaxation techniques and all of these different things would help with IBS. Okay.
Great. All right. Next question. Sanity, is that good or bad for our gut?
Sorry?
Senna, S-E-N-N-A.
Oh,
Senna.
Senna. So that's
Yeah.
like a laxative. Yeah. Yeah. Not in the long term. These are other things that you're getting rid of the good bacteria as well, not in the long terms, you know, maybe an initial thing. But then again, if you're adopting a plant-based diet, I think you're drinking enough water, even the way how you know, your position in defecating, you know, adopting good position. We shouldn't have to be using resorting to some of these laxative, doing breathing exercises, diaphragmatic breathing. These are all things that we can do to help if we're suffering from constipation.
When you mentioned about eating a wide variety of foods, you mentioned about should be like 30 different. The comment was that yes, someone added 6 so far today, an additional 6 foods to their diet, which is great. You're quite right. We don't eat a lot of variety of foods. We go to the supermarket every week and we go to the various aisles that we normally can go to. We normally go in the supermarket and we can close our eyes, go to this aisle and not branch out into other areas. So it's really, really good in promoting that and encouraging us all. Another question here for calcium. What can one have on a plant-based diet? So if they're on a plant-based diet, are persons concerned in that, are they getting enough calcium or not?
Calcium. So, I mean, you know, we're led to believe that we can only get calcium from things like milk. I mean, milk, cow's milk, and all of these things. But we can get calcium from things like spinach, green leafy vegetables, things like tofu, things like you know, things. So even some of our legumes and stuff like that, we can get calcium from. But things like broccoli and all of these different things, we can get calcium. So a lot of green leafy vegetables, spinach, kale, and things like tofu as well, we can get calcium. Okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask one more question and I'm gonna hand over to Nisha. Nisha, you have some questions there for us. But this question is,
yeah, I have 3 questions.
What is the remedy? What's the best remedy for dizziness and tetanus in the ears, ringing in the ears? Any advice on that? Is that then linked to the gut microbiome? Because
I mean, dizziness has multiple causes. You know, it could be from a virus, it could be from neurological, it could be from an ear infection. There are multiple causes. In terms of neurological condition, there's something that we call Meniere's disease, where some people have vertigo and stuff like that. There's a possible link, like there's could be a possible link to the gut microbiome, but I'm not sure. As I said, dizziness has many causes, so it's difficult to say what this person is driving at. But if there is, we still, as I said, this gut microbiome is still in its infancy stage, so we're still learning. Okay. What I can say is that when they've looked at the gut microbiota of someone who has Alzheimer's, there's a distinct characteristic, or somebody that has things like autism or Parkinson's disease, there's a distinct characteristic. Okay, that's what I can say. Yeah. So it's still in its infancy stage. I can't talk too much about that, unfortunately.
Does a low-calorie diet affect your microbiome? If it's lower than usual, then what you have to take daily?
Yeah, so a low-caloric diet. So people that have specific diseases. So some people like obese, you know, people that are overweight and stuff like that, or they may put them on a low-caloric diet. But again, you're restricting. Yeah, you're restricting you're restricting major food groups. And I think in the long run, yes, you may be able to lose weight, but in the long run, it's not beneficial. Again, try to adopt a plant-based, whatever you do, try to adopt a plant-based diet is calorie dense. A plant-based diet is calorie dense, but it's also low in calories. So yes, that is what I would encourage. Plant-based, calorie dense, but is low in calorie.
Can you take probiotics while you're doing your antibiotics, or do you wait until you've completed the dose of antibiotics before you start taking the probiotics?
Yeah, you can take it along with your antibiotics, definitely. And I would encourage you to take it even up to a week after you finish your antibiotics.
Okay.
Okay.
And the last, thank you very much. And the last question is, what is your view on colonic cleansers, and how often would you advise to do this?
Yeah, I mean, there are different schools of thought. I wouldn't encourage it too much. Again, this is a way of you're losing a lot of your good bacteria as well. So that's not something I would admonish. Your colonic cleanser, yeah. But there are different schools of thought. Everybody has different opinion. But we want to have a diverse gut microbiome. So I would say if you can avoid doing colonic cleanser, definitely. There's some people who they have to do things like procedures like colonoscopy, where they do a camera test and all of these different things. So they have to get rid of all the feces and stuff. So for a short period of that, for specific purposes like that, definitely you would have to use it. But other than that, not something that I would advocate.
Thank you so much. If someone likes what you have been presenting this morning and want to come to you for a consultation, is that possible?
If they want to contact me, I guess they can contact me through you as well. So that's one way. I can leave my email address as well.
Yes.
So if they want to ask any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to share and provide some answers. Yeah.
So I don't want to keep you anymore, Dr. Vernette. You have been by far the most, no, let me speak for myself, interesting and detailed medical person that came on this platform. And we just want to thank you for your time out of your busy schedule. So may God bless you and your ministry.
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies. As I said, I feel more humbled and more blessed that to be on this platform. And thank you for your support and kind words.
You're welcome. God be with you and bless you in your further endeavors.
Yes, thank you.
Amen. Yes.
Amen. Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'm sure we can arrange something later on. Things.
We'll talk. Okay. So may God bless you. May God be with you. May God guide you, protect you, and keep you, favor you and your loved ones as you embark on a new week. God bless everyone.